As I see the last vestiges of my home burn behind me and the vessels of other escapees conflagrate all around me, only one thought permeates my mind. What a horrible species. My people had lived for thousands of solar cycles by themselves, bound to the ground of our birth world. My people had then spent thousands of cycles soaring through the endless sky between stars. My people are now dying. Our first contact with the species known as humans dates to a couple of hundred cycles after we had become spacefarers. They were mighty, their numbers were great, and their age was shocking. Their words were thunder, and could be understood even without speaking their tongue. Their vessels were bigger than anything we had made. Shaped like the mighty pillars of our temples, they shone bright under the light. Their engines dwarfed fleets of our fledgling spacefaring vessels. They traced lines across the stars as a blade does through flesh, their swiftness unparalleled. They were fleeing in fear, dreading their own lands and their own creations, swearing they'd not fight us, and would even surrender their lives if it meant that they could be granted peace, even in the form of a temporary reprieve. We were shocked, for we found that we weren't alone in this galaxy, but we also found that our neighbors weren't that close to us, were much more advanced, and were full of fear. We welcomed them, promised them no violence nor hatred. They were as gods in power, but were as lost hatchlings in spirit. For thousands upon thousands of more cycles we had taken care of them, and they had taught us, their secrets, ours, their mighty, ours. When we finally reached them as equals, it was the beginning of a golden age for my people. All that had plagued us slowly disappeared. Hunger, conflicts, all the massive struggles that had been our spark to act, smothered. It took time, but we learned to do what we did, to keep living as we had done, not out of cravings, but out of love for life. We gazed at the universe with golden eyes full of wonderment the humans never truly did. The oldest of them all always looked at the sky with dread and fear, their shoulders slumped, their brows frowning, their eyes wide with alertness. As generations passed, and even the oldest of the humans faded into memory, something always remained off about them, like an existential fear, the weight of consequences yet to come, constantly casting a shadow over their joy. My people claimed for themselves planet after planet, first all the celestial bodies orbiting our own beloved star, with droves and swarms of vessels gutting every asteroid we could. Then we learned from the humans' ancient ark how they had managed to travel the void between stars. It took many tries, failures, and sacrifices, but we learned to reproduce the arcane technology behind their ships. Eventually our vessels flew over worlds upon which the light of suns that weren't ours shone. We seeded outposts. We tried colonies far away from our home. We learned on our skin how to adapt our society to the demands that the distance, both physical and cultural, imposed upon the colonists. We endured these struggles we willingly faced, we overcame them, and we grew stronger from them. Challenge after challenge, we grew, we advanced, joyful in the freedom our advancements had brought us. Yet the humans kept wary, each generation keeping their forebears' wariness towards the stars, looking in the direction of their long-abandoned birthplace. Mighty people they were, and mighty people they remained, yet we equaled them. As equals we could all feel that something was wrong, but not in what they did, but in what they knew and didn't reveal. Nonetheless, our polity prospered. Our struggles were being buried in the past, and a bright future shined upon us, and it kept shining for a long, long time. We had thousands of years of peace and quiet. We explored, yes, but our explorations were deep, were complex, and were thought out. We first fully understood everything that our own world had to offer, then all those of our solar system, then of the various colonies we had created. Our domain was small, yet solid. The humans we had welcomed so long ago always were beside us, warning us of things we were close to finding out. In hindsight, they acted very much like herders, and corralled us with their technological knowledge away from certain discoveries. I realize it only now because of how much of a difference there is between our humans and the others that came. Because of course more humans came. A day like any other, enjoying the beauty of an advanced society and its benefits, strange and massive vessels came. A massive fleet, counting hundreds upon hundreds of ships, most small, simple and angular in shape. A few vessels resemble and shape the creatures that populated one of our ocean colonies, long hulls, with many leg-like appendages. Their greatest one was more akin in shape to a seafaring vessel, with a massive ventral fin extending downward as long as the ship itself was. They eclipsed all our vessels and even dwarfed the human ark, now a monument to times past. I was among the ones that volunteered for a diplomatic mission. For the first time in dozens of cycles, I was feeling actually tense, maybe a tinge of fear too. I had a few humans with me too, as our shuttle took off our homeworld and accelerated towards the fleet. Some of ours were truly delighted, and some were filled with dread. Since our two species met, no other contact had been made with a sentient species. We communicated with the new arrivals using the language the humans used when they first arrived, all tongue they call it, something that speaks in concepts and only in truths. We were given coordinates in return. Once we had arrived, we were met by a little station, pavilion-like, floating in place. Waiting for us beside it was what the new arrivals used as their shuttle. The ship was linear too, bulky yet sleek. Once near the pavilion, they entered one of the hangars that belted the station, and we did so too. Inside there was artificial gravity, slightly lighter than the one of our home world. A cursory analysis revealed that the station not only had air, but also that it was perfectly breathable. Lights delineated a path for us to follow towards the center of the station. We still remained with our suits on. Some writs appeared here and there, small signs in an alphabet none of us understood. A new contact, so exciting I thought to myself. Fool. We reached a large circular room after just a few minutes of walking. Inside there were 5 massive figures, covered in great carapaces. They bore resplendent armaments, and their carapaces were built of bright plates that seemed made of light itself, dimmed and given form. I took a risk and took off my helmet as a gesture of goodwill. From one of the figures came a short sound, which was quieted as the central one raised their hand. Then the central carapace opened. Out walked a lithe, fleshy entity, much shorter without their suit, a human. All my companions, me included, gasped. It was a human male, indistinguishable from our own, bar for one thing, his eyes. The other figures took off what I understood now was their helmets. Men and women they were, humans all. And all their eyes had this specific glare. A kind of sight my species hasn't used outside of rituals for a long time. They were the eyes of a hunter and a killer, and they were eyeing us at that moment in an effort to understand how much of a threat we would be. Only the unsuited one was different. His eyes had the same pitiful look one has before doing something they hate, but have to do. My companions then took off their own helmets. The result was not what we were anticipating. The center figure, most likely their leader, let out a tired scoff at the sight of our humans. He even glanced at the guards he had brought with himself. Do we really have to do this? He clearly thought. One of my companions tried to begin conversing, but one of our humans overtook him and asked first, "How's our home, world?" He referred to Earth, the world we had heard stories about, a world at the center of a hegemony that spanned in every direction for tens of thousands of light years. They had left it when the hegemony was in its dying throes, from terrible calamities spawned from within. When a Terran referred to it, the word always carried a heavy inflection of longing, regret, and love. Dead, answered the unsuited human using the all-tongue. The concepts that came from those words were not even of sorrow, but of a sort of faithful reverence, like one has towards ancient stories, legends, or foundation myths. This worried me. These humans weren't Terrans like ours. The Terrans were racked by shock and sorrow, and the newcomers remained stone-faced. The unsuited one extended his arm rightward, and one of his posse passed him a wide and long item. He showed it towards us. "This is not a weapon," he said in all tongue. It was a scabbard, and slowly he pulled out a blade. It wasn't a weapon indeed. The edges were so dulled they couldn't have cut even our suits. Not dulled, chipped, etched as if with tally marks, and bore the same strange letters we had seen on our way there. The suited newcomers closed their helmets. The unsuited took a deep breath, as one does before reading something, and instead loudly sighed and sheathed the lettered blade. "Half your planetary rotation. That's how long you have. Then the fleet will burn your worlds. Do not fight." Die or flee. Nothing stops the eternal march of our people. The newcomer stepped back into the suit. Go now, or stay and join the many dead. The five turned around and made to get out of the room. Why? For what reason? Asked the Terran. For armored ones kept walking. The leader stopped and turned to face us one last time. His helmet opened, and his eyes told me he had even more sorrow than before. He opened his mouth, but no single coherent concept came out. Instead, it was a tale of regret and sins of the past, a story of an unbreakable will to right them and prevent them from ever happening again, at the cost of any and every cruelty against all variables that may interfere with this endless plan. We were a variable in their eyes, nothing more. His helm closed, and he disappeared behind closing bulkheads. The shock quickly wore off, and we ran back to our shuttle. Even as we started our flight, our sensors picked massive energy signatures from the fleet. More ships were materializing in. They were neither the small ones that swarmed around the main behemoths, nor more behemoths themselves. Still enormous in size, these new ships bore the shape of an elongated casket. Even with our weak sensors, we could see all the weapon ports. The engines of the ships, already there too, had started to slowly crawl towards our homes. The trails they left behind eerily reminiscent of the Terran arcs. Our return trip was in silence, bar for the status reports about the ship, and for the initial warning message we had sent to our people. We found the old Terran arc brought back to life, and as we flew down to the planet's surface, it flew past us, aimed not for the space between stars, but towards the incoming fleet. Some Terran had decided they'll run no longer. Upon landing, I found that a massive electronic attack had been waged upon the colony during our return trip. Nothing had been managed, but every single piece of data our civilization had on ourselves had been plundered. Mainly and firstly, the location of all our colonies and settlements in this and every other system. I scurried to gather my kith and kin and pack them into one of the shuttles we used to visit relatives on in system colonies. We took as many supplies as we could and took flight for the jump ships parked at the edge of the system, further away from the newcomers. Just like that, the hours had passed, and the fleet had reached all the settled planets and planetoids within our star's gravity well. A long-range observation system was transmitting a live feed of the Ark's last stand. It wielded weapons we never knew it had, nor the humans had ever shared. Bright lances of pure energy, thrown into space, facing a direction and hitting in another. Massive gravitic bubbles spawned and collapsed unto themselves, small black holes instantly crushing everything cut within their event horizon. Yet for all of the Ark's firepower, the fleet simply flew by it. Every weapon was caught up in an impossible duel against the greatest of the newcomer ships, whose barrages of attacks matched and countered every shot the Ark could take. Every last particle crushed, even alteration in gravity abjured and overwhelmed. One near miss at a time, the Ark found itself stripped of armor, sections completely cut away, covered in burning lines and gashes. Eventually, its own shine faded and started to drift silently. Other hordes of shuttles were flying besides ours, all bound for the jump ships. The panic and fear of extinction had already started to set in, to the point that the crew of a jump ship had to kill their own captain and officers because they wanted to jump without anyone and to run away. We managed to reach one and find an anchoring spot. Many others flocked to us. Eventually space ran out, and I saw points one which had multiple shuttles locked onto each other in a stacked tower, even hundreds of them. I refused to look at any data regarding the fate of our planets. We knew only from theory how many gruesome ways can a starship deliver death from above, and I was interested in bearing witness to none of them. Hours passed, as more evacuation vessels arrived. A message in all tongue overtook all networks. Proceed. This single word and concept was pure weaponized panic. It exuded the aura of finality, of an execution, of an order from which one cannot escape. As this word was heard, beams of energy hugged one of the jump ships. With a flash of light, it was gone. Small pieces of debris are the only thing that tells there was ever a starship there. The loud humming of the full drive activating reverberates through the entire vessel. I finally cave in and pull up a feed from one of the remaining satellites we have in system. Massive columns of light and energy pierce my world. Beams rain endlessly from the casket ships, burning one by one all the settled asteroids and carving deep scars on planetary surfaces. I can see the seas evaporate in front of my eyes, deserts turning to grass, and jungles turning to cinder. Space begins to fold around the jump ship. One other message arrives. I want to shut it off, but it can't be cut out. We will find you. This is a promise. This is a threat. This is our doom. As I see the last vestiges of my home burn behind me and the vessels of other escapees conflagrate all around me, only one thought permeates my mind. What a horrible species.